My guest today is the very welcome Dr. David Adler, who's president of the Australian Jewish Association and former Deputy Secretary of the Australian Medical Association. The fact is, and welcome, David.
Thank you, Professor David Flint, and it's always a privilege to join you.
Well, once again, thank you in coming to us in these very troublesome times. Now, I put an observation into the Spectator when I saw Miss Wong's, I thought, outrageous position and so inappropriately timed to flirt with the two-state solution. And I've come to the conclusion as an outsider that the two-state solution isn't comatose, it's dead and buried. What's your feeling about the so-called two-state solution?
Well, we actually call it a two-state delusion. And there seems to be a complete disconnect between some of the Western politicians and what's happening on the ground in the Middle East. As most people know, the possibility of a Palestinian state has been offered numerous times, 6 or 8 times, to the Arab Palestinians and rejected every time with no counteroffer. And there is no doubt that in the current circumstances, the Israeli Jews do not want it. And the Arab Palestinians also do not want it for quite different reasons, mind you. The radicalization has been underway for 2 generations, and the idea of being able to coexist peacefully with the Jewish state, unfortunately, has very little support amongst the Arab Palestinians. So neither the Jews want it, the Arabs don't want it. The only people who are still pushing it are those Western politicians left of centre. There is no two-state solution. Maybe a couple of generations ago it was possible, but dead and buried is the correct term, David.
And I think it should be remembered that when you look at the whole of the mandate, the British added Transjordan to the mandate and then extracted it. And that really is the Arab state. That is an enormous Arab state. And that in many ways provided the state for the Arab people.
Yes, you're correct. The British Mandate of Palestine, which was established after the Allies' victory in World War I, included a reasonably large area. It was not the only mandate. There was another British mandate. There was a French mandate. But of the British Mandate of Palestine, which was established for the primary purpose of creating a Jewish homeland, restoring the Jewish homeland in the ancient biblical lands of Israel, 77% of the British Mandate was allocated to create a new Arab state, Transjordan, now renamed Jordan. So it had a lot of Arab Palestinians in that area. And of course, the Arabs in the Middle East have a lot of choices. There are 21 or 22 Arab states, many places they can go. And it's another issue why many of them do not want the Arab Palestinians, but the Jews only have one choice. There's a saying in Hebrew, Ein Aretz Acheret, we have no other land. That's it, one choice. Whereas the Arabs have numerous choices.
And certainly after the Second World War, particularly after the creation of Israel, when Jewish people were expelled from many Arab countries, Israel absorbed an enormous number of people coming from Arab countries, thrown out of Arab countries without their possessions. And it seems reasonable to assume that Arab countries would do the same in relation to those people who are unhappy in living within the only democracy in the Middle East.
David, you're touching on a really important moral issue, and that is that Israel took upon itself the duty of being able to look after its Jewish brethren from wherever they are persecuted. The expulsions from the Arab lands, some fled from Europe, and even today, where there is peaks of anti-Semitism, Jewish people who feel that they cannot tolerate where they live have a right to resettle in Israel.
On another matter, neither Egypt nor Jordan will open their borders to anybody from Gaza, but the Albanese government, without being able to verify the sort of people they were bringing into Australia, decided to give temporary visas to a considerable number of people from Gaza. Why they did that, it's not clear, but it is obvious that they couldn't properly verify them. And now there are reports in the media that a significant number are now seeking asylum in Australia. What do you think of the exercise of the immigration power by the Albanese government in relation to this? It seems to me to be extraordinarily lax and careless.
I would say it's reckless.
Yes.
This is not moderate risk. This is not high risk. This is extreme risk. And the reason we know this is because a number of studies since the 7th of October have been done concerning the attitude of the people of Gaza broadly. And there have been some really shocking results that should wake up everyone, that Hamas and its brutal terrorism of the 7th of October, where it murdered elderly people, babies, sexual violence, enjoys 75% support, according to 2 different studies. So it is inconceivable that within the cohort of over 2,000 being brought to Australia, there are not people who are sympathetic to Hamas, who support Hamas. There may well be some who are actual Hamas operatives, and there could be some who would be willing to act out jihadist terrorism in Australia. And the rapidity with which these visas have been issued is unlike the application process, say, for ordinary asylum seekers, which, as we all know, can take a very long time and arguably too long. So it is almost inevitable that the Labor government is importing people who are hostile to democratic values, who are highly anti-Semitic and have been brought up to hate the West and to glorify terrorism. So I fear for the result. And there is some European experience from similar demographics that show a very high violent crime rate to those that were brought in. And why it's happening is another issue. And there are those who argue that this is the Labor government playing politics, trying to appeal to certain electorates in Western Sydney, particularly, that have a high Muslim population, and this would be an initiative which is popular amongst that group. But it does put Australian domestic security at risk, in our view.
So the Albanese government is willing to take that risk, you think, because they see advantage in the coming election. Well, that is an appalling situation. And it's, I think, to an extent supported by the fact that both the Albanese government and the New South Wales government are soft on anti-Semitic hate speech and threatened violence. There's an enormous amount, a whole ream of examples of this sort of thing going on, and the governments have done nothing about it. They have not even significantly denounced it.
It's dreadful. I didn't expect that in my lifetime we would see this sort of environment in Australia. Australia had, in the past, a reputation for being tolerant, and the Jewish community has been a major contributor in Australian society, and willing to accept all comers that are prepared to embrace Australian values of having a go, hard work, tolerance of others. But there are some really ugly components in our society. On the university campuses, there is not just anti-Israel activism, but outright anti-Semitism, to the point that many Jewish students feel that it is no longer safe for them to attend the university campuses. I mean, that is shocking, and I hope that the government develops a moral backbone on this, because without proper leadership, you can't turn this problem around, and at the moment we don't have the required leadership.
The problem seems to be that ever since the Gillard government, when a leading minister led a revolt against the government over our bipartisan position in the United Nations, the test seems to be now, and it came from that leading minister at that time, how can I defend this policy on the steps of the Lakemba Mosque? It seems as though Australian policy, government policy, not only foreign policy, but domestic policy, is now to be determined, according to the ALP, as to whether the policy can be defended on the steps of the Lakemba Mosque.
It's an interesting observation, and not without data. The Australian newspaper, to its credit, a couple of weeks ago, published an article on roughly titled "The Numbers That ALP Power Brokers Are Scared Of," and it was an analysis of 29 electorates that had a Muslim population of 5% or more. I would commend the article. It's not hard to find on an internet search. Of those 29 electorates, 27 are held by Labor, and some of those are being targeted by the Greens. And as we know, the Greens are probably the most anti-Semitic political party that Australia has ever seen. They have quite radical policies across a range of things, including attitude to Israel and the Middle East. And Labor's response seems to be to try to chase their policies towards the Greens in order to defend certain electorates. So, there is statistical electorate analysis which does support the hypothesis that what is going on here in the balance between Australian interest and community safety versus grubby electoral politics, it is the grubby electoral politics which is coming out on top under the Albanese administration, and led by people like Penny Wong. We think it's dangerous for the medium term of Australia, and it's also distanced us not just from Israel, but also from our most important defence ally, the United States. Even under the Biden administration, they have not gone down this sort of path. They're not throwing money into the discredited UN agency UNRWA. They've actually banned funding UNRWA for a further 12 months. They're not bringing in large numbers of refugees from Gaza. So Australia is taking a much more radical position than the Biden administration across a number of relevant measures, and this also can't be in Australia's national interest.
And on that, I think you state the position absolutely correctly. David Adler, I want to thank you for your continuing measured, calm, and very well argued position in this regard. It is important for the whole nation. Thank you, David.
Thank you. And I have an article on this subject in the coming Spectator magazine, dated the 27th of April. If people are interested, I'd suggest that they pick up a copy.
Spectator, the 27th of April, and we will certainly be looking at that closely. Thank you very much, Dr. Adler.
Thank you, Professor David Flint.